Good morning and welcome to the December 6, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. If you could please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So earlier this morning we were in closed session, and at this time I'll have the clerk read out.
Closed session, item number 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with County Designated Labor Negotiators Judy Hawkins, Shay Johnson, and Nick Marvin regarding the following employee organizations: Sheriff's Management Union, SMU, Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association, CCP-SEA, Deputy Sheriff's Association, DSA, Calaveras Management Union, Calaveras Supervisors Union, and Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 1021, SEIU, Local 2015, unrepresented employees. Board action, there was no reportable action taken.
Thank you. At this time we'll move on to staff announcements. Are there any staff announcements? Okay. Not seeing any in the room. Are there anyone online?
No, there is not.
Okay. Next, we will be moving on to recognitions and acknowledgements. If the clerk could please read out item number 2.
Item number 2 is a proclamation, adopt a proclamation congratulating Barbara Sullivan on her retirement.
And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Tofinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to do a Marita here. Barbara, come on up to the podium.
Raise your right hand.
I'm going to come down here and read it, because I know Marita always does. And
yeah.
Congratulations. Let me move this over here so you can hear it. This is a proclamation congratulating Barbara Sullivan on the occasion of her retirement as treasurer, tax collector of the Calaveras County. And by the way, Barbara, I will be in your office later after the meeting. I've got to pay my taxes. So. Whereas Barbara Sullivan began her public service in Calaveras County in May of 2022 in the Calaveras County's auditor's office, transferring to the treasurer tax collector's office in July of 2006. And whereas Barbara Sullivan took office as the elected treasurer tax collector effective January 3rd, 2011. I remember that. Yeah. Did I swear you in that day? Whereas Barbara Sullivan has rendered distinguished service to the county for 20 years, demonstrating the highest standards of integrity and professionalism, applying her expertise and sound judgment to the policies and laws governing the responsibilities of the treasurer tax collector. That's very nice. Good job. And whereas Barbara Sullivan's broad professional background includes banking, agriculture, transportation, and the wine industry's collections, where she became the first credit and collections manager for the wine group and is credited with forming the Northern California chapter of credit and collection managers for wine distribution throughout the United States. Wow, it's pretty awesome. Where she was often referred to as, what were you referred to as? The Velvet Hammer. And whereas Barbara Sullivan's perspective and thoughtful attention to safety has brought her staff peace of mind as a driving force for the new safety features in her office. Whereas Barbara Sullivan has led the treasurer tax collector's office through many challenges, and she has, over the years she has, and changes and developments, always looking for ways to improve processes for internal efficiencies as well as citizen services. And whereas Barbara Sullivan has proven herself to be a valuable asset as a member of the Cannabis Committee for the CAC-TTC, and recently led a new treasurer tax collectors training at the 2022 CAC-TTC Education Conference. Wow, CAC-TTC. Okay. Can you tell us what that is?
California Association of County Treasurer Task Force.
All right.
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. It is. Whereas Barbara Sullivan has been characterized by her staff and colleagues as hardworking, dedicated, honest, supportive, a wealth of knowledge, always keeping a positive attitude, who leads by exemplary example, and has shown the utmost dedication by always being available to her staff, colleagues, and the public. And whereas, after retirement, Barbara Sullivan plans on traveling the United States and abroad and spending time with family and friends. So where's the first place you're going? Portugal. Well, that's not traveling the United States. That's abroad. So we should have said abroad first and then the United States. Okay. All right.
Depends.
So I'm going to call for public comment. I'm going to ask for board comments. Board comments.
Ms. Sullivan, the only perk we got as supervisors was you reminding us that our taxes were due. Is this something that you're going to be telling our next treasurer?
Most definitely. She knows.
And I just want to know, are you going to notify me from wherever you are that my taxes are due?
Yes, forever the December 10th and April 10th are in my brain, so.
Okay.
Yes, I'll think of you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I appreciate that. It's been really a pleasure working with you, Barbara, over the years.
Same thing.
Are there any other board comments? Staff? Public comments. Oh, Ben, I'm sorry.
Just on that email to Marita, you can do an auto send. You can predate that. So for the next 5 years, even if you're busy, that email can go out as a reminder to Ms. Callaway.
Is there any public comments? Judy?
No, I just want to thank you, Barbara. You have been a pleasure to work with over my 7 years here. It was crazy in the beginning, 7 years ago with the Bee Fire, and you have been an absolute pleasure to work with, and you will be missed.
It's been a pleasure. It's been wonderful. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. We're both in the same place.
Yeah, I'm going to the Azores in the summer.
I've worked with you for many years, the whole time that you've been here, and thank you. We've had some great adventures, some assessment district adventures and bonds and all sorts of stuff, but throughout that, I would consider that our friendship is our greatest thing that we've done.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Any other public comments?
I just want to thank you for putting up with me. When we've discussed sticky issues, we've always been able to resolve them easily. And I really appreciate all the work you've put in for the county and also to help train your staff so that things run really smoothly. And I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, same here, Kathy. It's been a pleasure. Too bad it was an honor.
Yeah.
Other public comments? Al?
Al Gallant, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. We really appreciate the work you've done, and it's kind of interesting that a taxpayers group would be supporting. But the most important thing in government is honesty and fairness, and you've shown that, and the taxpayers really appreciate your service. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Gary,
Public comments online.
are there any public comments online?
There's nobody online that would like to comment.
Okay. Well, I'll bring it back to the board. I'm open for a motion.
So move this item.
Second.
A motion by Marita, a second by Amanda. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Certainly hope none. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors acknowledges Barbara Sullivan for her dedication and exemplary service to the County of Calaveras, and be it further resolved that the Board of Supervisors commends Barbara Sullivan for her achievements in the position of Treasurer Tax Collector and congratulates Barbara on the occasion of her retirement. Passed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Calaveras, State of California, this 6th day of December. And Barbara, we have a gift for you. Can you please open it and read it?
Sure. I have to read it. Good thing I brought my glasses. Oh, what? Oh. Ooh. The legend has officially retired 2023. Not my problem anymore. That's so cool. Very nice. Thank you. Very nice. It's hard to believe it won't be my problem anymore, because it still will be.
You can use it on your way to Portland.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Oh, okay.
We'll give you the-
Next we have up is item number 3 under recognition and acknowledgement. If the clerk could please read out.
Item number 3 is a proclamation to adopt a proclamation congratulating Leslie Davis on her retirement.
And I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Callaway.
Ms. Davis. I really wanted to do this one because Leslie and I have had many encounters over the years. Usually she starts to say something and I say no. Starts to say something, no. So it's sort of a running dialogue between Leslie and I. And well, come stand over here near me. So this is the first time and only time I'm saying yes. All right. Whereas Leslie Davis began her public service in Calaveras in April 2000 in the Calaveras County, Calaveras County, we know it's the county.
Thank you.
And she started in the assessor's office. I'm making grammatical changes as I read this. Leslie served in the Calaveras County, in case you all don't know, Calaveras is a county, assessor's office for 22 years, with service as an appraiser, assessment standards analyst, assistant assessor, acting assessor, and elected assessor effective January 3, 2011. She served as a member of the California I'm going to really screw that one up, Association for 19 years, took the position as CAA president in 2019. She served as a member of the Northern California Assessors Association. Can I just say AA? Okay. Leslie's earned the admiration and respect of her colleagues across the state with her dedication, enthusiasm, professionalism, and you're not going to believe it, but her sense of humor. She does have one. I know the board is, we're kind of,
I try to avoid
we
it
don't
with
see
you.
that. Yeah, we notice. She has been committed and dedicated public servant and has worked tirelessly and cooperatively, ensuring fair and equitable assessments for every property in Calaveras County. She was presented with the Excellence in Public Service Award in 2013. During her tenure, she's trained every new staff member with a particular emphasis on following the revenue and taxation code to the letter. Not only did she make them do it, former Supervisor Terry Bailey and I had to go to a revenue and taxation code class because the board served as the local board of, yeah, we did that until the assessor finally decided we need a special group to hear the appeals because the Board of Supervisors can't do it. And I went to a class so I could do it, really. And I had to pay for it myself. Let's see, sorry about that. I digress, truly sorry. She is a devoted member of Fred's of the Calaveras County Fair and Jumping Frog Jubilee from 2010 to 2017. She's well known for her detailed answers to questions, starting with, sit back, pour your a favorite beverage, and then she goes into a long dissertation of which we all learn from. You do it to us, you do it to the public. I love it. Despite occasionally losing frog jump to county council.
Are you going to correct that error? You've
Yeah.
corrected every other one.
Yeah. She has a brilliant mind and is one of the state's foremost experts in the field of property tax assessment. Whereas we all anticipate she will write the great American novel when she retires. Sounds familiar, huh? So I'm going to ask for a motion from the board, but first, is there any public comment? The fact that some of you, I know, have concerns about how your property's assessed. Too bad. Are there any comments from the board?
Doppler?
I'll save my comment.
Okay.
You save your comment?
I'll save my comment for a moment.
Oh, okay.
He's going to save his comment.
One safe comment.
Topanelli?
I have a comment.
Yes, Supervisor. Ooh, this is getting pretty serious.
Thank you, Leslie, for all the years of service, even while you were working for Randy and you assumed the job. I want to thank you for all the dedicated work you've done, and you always have an answer. If we have constituents that have questions from us and we ask you, you always have a question, you always have an answer for them, and it's a good answer, it's a correct answer. And even when you talk to them, even though they don't like it and you don't like telling them because you know they're not going to like it, you still tell them exactly like it is. That's very good. And I thank you for that and for all the years we've worked together.
I'd like to mirror Mr. Topanelli's words. And for being clear, when I've gone in and asked questions, you've been very clear to me, how I'm wrong, why I'm wrong, But, you know, sometimes, the hard truth is the way to portray it, and Leslie, and we knew we could always, what your hand was, we got to see it, so, thank you.
If there's no other public comment, any comments online?
Are there any Zoom comments online?
To talk.
I know, I've got to speak it into the mic really fast.
There is no Zoom comments.
Okay, we'll go back to the room.
Could you put the timer on, Mr. Segala, please?
You're on stage.
Oh, I think I gave him an extra 4 minutes last time, Marita.
We can deduct.
Al Segala, County Taxpayer Association, also a member of the Assessors Appeals Board, and as such, I got a chance to really appreciate Leslie. She's a hard worker, honest, and fair. What more could you ask for a public official? Thank you, Leslie.
So I am going to miss you keeping me on my toes. And in the beginning, when I would get the very detailed emails with all the history, I tried to match and give you very detailed, long answers. And have you noticed over the last 7 years, they've gotten shorter, shorter, and shorter, and now they're about 3 words. So, but
Yours or her answer?
Mine. But I appreciate you have always, in your emails, in asking questions, you have also given me the historic why you're asking the answers, how it was handled in the past, and how am I going to handle it now. So, and in the very beginning, when I first started, I'd only been here about a week. When I first met you, you said, I'm not sure I'm going to like you. It depends on if you get my staff raises. So we're still working on that. We're working on it. So I am going to miss you. Like I said, you keep me on my toes, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And congratulations on your retirement. All right.
Did you see how that appointed department head just told you to get out of there?
Yeah, I did. He knows how to count to 3. Oh, no, we don't have to count to 3 anymore. He only needs to count to 1. We have a CEO. Go ahead.
Hi, Stan Moore from IT. Leslie, I want to thank you for the time that I've had to work with you. I came here 8 years ago. You were one of the ones that helped to educate me on what it was going to be like working in government, working for Calaveras County, things that I should be doing to be successful, not just in working with you, but working with the county. You've always been, this is a continuing theme from the other people who've spoken. You've always been very honest, very open. You've told me things I like to hear. You've told me things that I didn't like to hear. But you've helped me in my journey all the way. And you have been a great partner of IT all along. We've laughed together. There have been times where I haven't laughed when I've been talking with you. But it's been overall. But it's been a wonderful relationship. You will be missed, and I have greatly enjoyed working with you. So thank you, Leslie.
Leslie, you and I met when we were both in the assessor's office, and so I've worked with you in all of your various roles. The one thing I can say about her is she is extremely knowledgeable, and the one thing that I'm really concerned about, somebody mentioned writing a novel. I'm hoping you're going to write down all of that information you have, the historic knowledge of what's happened in the county and what boards have voted what in over the years, because you can always count on Leslie having said, oh, but do you remember when? And then she would just recall everything that occurred. And some of that is not written down anywhere. So maybe you can be writing that.
Don't play. I think that's a good idea.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure, and congratulations.
Are there any other comments, either on Zoom or in the room? Okay, Marita?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you want to say anything before I take the vote, or wait till I take the vote and then you can say something? Let's take the vote and then you can say something. Got it. So that's smart. May I have a motion, please, on this proclamation?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Supervisor. Now, therefore...
Wait.
What?
All in favor?
Oh, yeah.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, turn it back over to Ms. Callaway.
God dang, it's hard being on this side of the podium. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors acknowledges Leslie Davis for her dedication, exemplary service to the County of Calaveras. Be it further resolved that the Board commends Leslie for her achievements in the position as assessor and congratulates you on the occasion of your retirement. I modified that. It was passed and adopted by the Board of the County of Calaveras, State of California, in case you forgot what state we're in, the 6th day of December 2022. Now, do you want to say something? All right, well, it depends.
Yes.
Yeah, could you put the timer on? Yes, it's a yes.
Madam Chair, honorable members of the board, my mother raised us on cliches, and one springs to mind as I listen to these comments, and it was, we stand on the shoulders of others. We stand on those who came before us, and for that I appreciate all the information I got from Randy Metzger, my successor, and those who came before him, Bill Ratterman and Charlie Clark. I also stand on the shoulders of my team. They are the ones that make us look good. And so I really want to acknowledge their hard work, everything they are doing, and know that as I walk out the door, I am leaving the office in a very good position to hit the ground running and keep up the very good work. I appreciate your kind words, appreciate the sense of humor. Marita is correct. We've had a lot of no comments and arguments over the years, so it's absolutely hilarious and endearing to me that you would be standing here. I just want to close by saying public service is a privilege, and it's been a privilege and an honor to serve the voters and residents and property owners of Calaveras County for almost 23 years. You can't know how much I appreciate that and how much I appreciate the collaboration that we've all had in helping to move the county forward. I wish you all the best of luck, and Marita, I won't be here next Tuesday for your proclamation.
There is none. I
Okay.
am sliding out the door.
Okay.
I am sliding out the door.
Nonetheless, I would like to acknowledge that you are also retiring at the end of this term, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Now, don't go away. I have something that is just like, this is you all over. And you, like Gary had with Barbara, you have to open it and you have to read it.
I have to open it and read it. Okay. Well, it feels like a cup. Assessor, I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right. Thank you. I know she wrote it.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the public general comment. So this is any item of interest to the public that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking any action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed in the allotted time period, it will continue as the last item of the business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comment to be heard. So at this time, I will start with in the room public comment. Are there any comments in the room? Okay. And then just a reminder, be mindful of the light on the podium.
Good morning, Tara McBride, New California State Senator and Committee Chair. I have some papers for the board, please. New California State is a new state in development and is exercising its God-given rights as declared in the 1776 United States Declaration of Independence as ratified in the 1789 United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 3 and 4. New California is the making of a new state, just like 50 other states have been formed to make the Union of States called the United States. This is something we've been working on quite a long time. We're really close to the final goal. So we, the people of the state of New California, notice to all Californians declaration of constitutional default. The state of California is in both financial and Article 4, Section 4 constitutional default and does not have constitutional standing as a member state and union of states called the United States of America. We, the people as citizens of the United States living in California, are following the process of West Virginia that successfully restored the Virginia state government after the Wheeling Conventions of 1861. Congress admitted California into the compact of statehood within the United States of America in 1850 because their 1849 Constitution ratified for consideration guaranteed a Republican form of government. California fails to provide, as required by law, an audited financial statement. California is the only state in the Union which for the last 3 years has not provided an audited financial statement. Lack of proper financial oversight by the bumptious California legislature that, by allowing agency employment of persons who were knowingly and willfully engaging in high-risk assumptions to underfund pensions in the normal course of their employment, have now put at risk the financial default of the state teachers' retirement system and California public employees' retirement system. I think that affects everybody that works for this county, doesn't it? Something they need to be aware of. This fills it in quite well, what's going on. If you go to, again, you're more than welcome to join us in our meetings on Sundays and Wednesdays. Also, I would highly recommend everybody in here take a look at Roland J. Brunson's federal lawsuit. It's going up in front of SCOTUS. You know what he did? Brilliant. They called him out for not following their constitutional oath of office and allowing the election on the 2020 to go through instead of doing a proper investigation when an investigation was warranted. I think they're going to find them all guilty. What's that going to do to the lower people within the states and the counties that unfortunately did not always follow their constitutional oath, especially with the pandemic? You want to watch that because this is going to happen. So be aware of it. It's the Brunson federal lawsuit. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments in the room? Okay, not seeing any, we'll switch to Zoom. Are there any Zoom comments?
There are no Zoom comments.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is consent. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from consent for later discussion. So at this time, are there any board members that wishes to remove an item off of consent? Okay, seeing none, is there any,
I just, quick one on number 12.
Okay, so Supervisor Garamendi is requesting number 12 to be pulled. I see Robert walking up to the podium. Robert?
Good morning. I would like item number 14 to be.
Okay, so we have 12 and 14. Are there any other staff or public members in the room that wishes to pull an item from consent? Not seeing any. Are there any Zoom?
There are not.
Okay. Next, is there any public comment on the items that are about to be approved? Not 12 and 14, but any other items for public comment? Okay, seeing none, and there's no public comment online, we'll move, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda item for all items minus 12 and 14?
So moved, Madam Chair.
We got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, okay, we're going to start with the consent agenda item number 12, Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you very much, and I'll be very brief. This is just more a reminder that I know we're going to be seeing the roadside spraying program coming forward this winter or spring, as we do annually. Last year, I asked that we investigate, and I totally value the program. I know why we do it, it's important. But I wanted to investigate if there are alternatives to glyphosates as we put it in our mix for the roadside spraying. And I just wanted to remind Public Works that I will be asking that question when it comes forward. Doesn't mean there's a good answer, but I would like you to look into it.
Yes, yes, sir.
That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Okay. With that, is there any public comment on consent item number 12? None? Okay, is there a motion to approve consent agenda item number 12?
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay, next we'll move on to consent agenda item number 14, and at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Packinger.
Good morning. On that item, the contract for Dewberry is for the design of the eastern portion of the Wagon Trail Realignment Project. Unfortunately, the copy that was submitted electronically within the board package is missing some pages that need to be included in the contract. I have copies of those pages here for you, and I believe the electronic copy has been updated. The the pages that are omitted consist of Caltrans documentation that needs to be included in the contract. And as long as we're speaking about the wagon trail, the pavement is complete. They're doing all sorts of finishing touches. There are guardrails, striping, dikes. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But at this point, I would like to invite the board members, the CAO and staff to come, county council to come and visit the site. Please let me know so that we can take you out to the site and look at it in peace without vehicles driving over that thing, and you have to be aware of the traffic at that time. But right now, there's no traffic on it. We hope to have it open at the end of the year, but we'll see how we do with the weather permitting. They still have some work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple board member questions, so I'll start with Gary.
Yes, in your recommendation on what you have here in a narrative, it says construction support. So are they retained for the entire construction of the Phase 2?
Yes, they will have to be, because whenever there are questions regarding the design or maybe some additional changes that need to happen, we'll have to go to them.
Okay, and the project management portion of that construction, is that included in this contract?
Some of that is included there, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jack? Your
no,
light's
ma'am.
on. Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Are there any other board questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Are there any online?
There is not. No.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the update. And just to clarify, so we don't have more than 3, we will contact staff directly and coordinate individual visit to the site.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. With that, is there a motion to approve consent agenda item number 14?
I move this item, Madam Chair.
Okay. Is there- Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes 5-0. Thank you, Robert. Okay. And now we're on for a regular agenda. have agenda item number 17, and what I would like to do is read out the item and then give about a 3-minute to get set up, if that's possible. Okay.
Item number 17 is an action item from the Administrative Office. Number 1, adopt the proposed 3-year countywide strategic plan. And number 2, discuss the future of the Strategic Planning and Financing Committee and take possible action.
Okay, with that, we have Robert Bendorf here, and we're going to give a couple minutes for him to set up, and then we will be back on. You good? Okay, I guess he's saying he's good, so come on up, Robert. Good morning, good to see you.
Good morning. So I thought I would surprise you with no PowerPoint this morning.
Yeah, I think.
Right? So Madam Chair, members of the board, Robert Bendorf with Municipal Resource Group. I won't say County Board of Supervisors because it's pretty obvious, right? It's a county board. I don't want Marita mad at me for the last month. You know, I often tell my kids who are 34 and 30 these days, and I've been telling them for a while, when they say, geez, you know, we have, you know, our cousins and our aunts and uncles or moms and dads that we want to buy a birthday gift for, or we want to celebrate with them with their anniversary, and what do we buy them? And I always tell them, hey, whether you're considering something for someone else or you're considering something for yourself, it doesn't always have to be tangible. And I encourage them that sometimes the experience itself can be greater than a tangible item, much more memorable, much more meaningful. And I think you probably heard that last word from me several times over the course of the last year. So I have to tell you that the experience itself of being able to work with your board, your department heads, staff that assembled the working group, and other staff members throughout the organization was fantastic. And it was a great experience. And I hope that experience of going through the planning here, and you've heard me use this phrase too, I hope the juice was worth the squeeze at the end of the day. But having said that, you know, the journey started about a year ago or so, and your board authorized putting together a working group that was phenomenal, that was engaged the entire time. Your board formed a strategic planning committee. Supervisors Fallendorf and Garamendi participated on that with your auditor controller and your treasurer tax collector and your CAO. But there was so much input that was provided by those committees, but where the real input, I think, came and the rubber hit the road was when all of you worked together. And it was amazing to watch the outcomes out of the numerous workshops that we had, that the board and staff and working together, sharing experiences or sharing directional comments that were important to them. Your board was listening and hearing what your team was saying, and they were listening and hearing what you had to say. So the experience that I took away was being able to watch that work well. And I can tell you, as most of you probably know from experiences and seeing it yourself, that it's not necessarily the case in a lot of jurisdictions. But you all certainly pulled it off in your organization here. You really didn't have an adopted strategic plan. There was a semblance of one, but was never formally adopted by the board. Wasn't put together in a comprehensive way or collaborative way. Your board started fresh with the basics, and I think came up with a really, really outstanding product. Again, very fortunate to be part of that experience with your board and your organization here in Calaveras. I'm going to sum it up briefly You've seen the document, I hope. But what I would add to that is actions really define outcomes. It's not words on a paper. It's not so much the raising of a point or, waving around a flag so much, saying we completed X. But those actions that I think were all present during the process was collaboration, communication, trust, and coherence. And it was amazing, again, to be in the catbird seat and watching this occur amongst your folks in your organization. Which leads us to the strategic plan. Again, it was, call it a labor of love, but important for me as you will go through the strategic plan, and I think it was an excellent job. I can't wait to see it in final production. Excellent job of the person that designed the final outcome. But I think the important thing for me is not only looking at an established mission and vision, but looking at what you value here. It was interesting in going through that process with your board and your department heads and your management team members about what you value here in Calaveras County. It was really difficult, I think, to push it down to maybe 4 or 5 core values because there were so many. And I think that's fantastic. You would love to keep, 20, 25 of them overall, but it really came down to 4 core values of integrity, service, sense of community, and you all know the one that's the most important to me, and that's people, because that's where it all starts. So having said that, I wanted to thank your board for the opportunity to be with you during the experience. Meant a lot to me, and I think I've made some observations that will help me, I think, just in moving forward and helping others that are good. And probably the biggest one that I take away was all of you working together and coming up with something that you really never had a chance to adopt together before. And now it's something that hopefully will help guide your organization off into the future. But it's been an absolute pleasure working with all 5 of you and your staff, and for working groups for putting up with me, the strategic planning committee, et cetera. And if I had a chance to do it all over again, I would. So having said that, I will stop there. You see the strategic plan in front of you that has your strategic focus areas, again, your mission, vision, and values. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And I know we have some working group folks here as well. And if you have any questions, just refer them to Sarah. She was there the whole time.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate all the work and the collaboration you did with the Strategic Planning and Finance Committee and the working group. And I think it's a huge shout out to the working group because they really put a lot of work and time into this and getting this in front of the board. I want to give an opportunity for the board members to ask any questions or comments on the plan in front of us. Jack.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Robert, I want to express my gratitude to you for your work over this last 18 months to get this thing done, especially in this last year. I want to thank the working group in particular. You guys did some great stuff, and I really appreciate it. It was nice as this thing came together at the end that we were doing the governance manual at the same time, because it helped us, certainly helped me compromise. This document has a lot of different voices in it, and I'm happy to support it as it stands. I want to give a special thank you to our chair of our committee, Amanda, for bringing this forward, getting this done. I'll be honest, I was a skeptic that we were going to be able to pull this off. And she drove and ground and pushed us all the way across the goal line. And thank you, Amanda, for doing that. I think you did a great service to this board and the county in making that happen. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank everybody who was involved in this, staff and leadership and yourself making this happen, and I'm happy to have been a part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Are there any other board questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none, then I need to turn it over to public comment. Well, there's a second part to this. I'm sorry, I need to take a step back. So there's a second part to this conversation as well. And the second part to this is to discuss the future of the Strategic Planning and Finance Committee and take possible action. So at this time, how would you propose, council, that we go forward?
You can kind of separate it out into two
Okay.
actions if you want, and take action on the strategic plan, and then we can talk
Okay.
about the committee.
Okay, let's do that. Is the board okay with that? We'll take one time, okay. So at this time, public comment on the proposed adoption of the 3-year strategic plan only. Are there any comments in the room? Al?
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Robert. Okay, you do have the timer this time. Just a reminder.
Okay, it hasn't started yet.
Yeah, there you go.
It's started. I sent an email within the time frame to get to the Board of Supervisors for an action item. I don't know if it was accepted, or are you going to,
It was distributed to the board.
okay, is the board going to discuss that item? Or did it disappear?
I don't think, it didn't disappear. The board received the correspondence.
Yeah,
It was,
is it going to be discussed? Because that's the item's up now.
I think you can discuss it now if you'd like.
Okay. George Washington said, we were talking about the nature of government. He said that government is not, I'm paraphrasing, not a social club or a philanthropic organization. It's essentially force, and like fire. And fire can be a dangerous servant and a fearful master. So if you would accept that the nature of government is force, it's not a social club, then it makes sense to ask the question, what is the legitimate use of that force? Is it to take from some to give to others? We do a lot of that. Is it to exclude some people? We do that too. If the nature of taking money, sometimes called taxes, and when the private sector does it, called theft. If you just say it's plunder, then there seems to be 4 categories of plunder. The few plunder the many plunder the few, everybody plunders everybody, and the 4th one is the absence of plunder. I think that last one is really the goal of our founding fathers when they formed the Constitution. This is why in the 5th and 14th Amendment made very clear that the nature of human rights is life, liberty, and property. If we focus on that, we can pretty well stay out of trouble and not hurt our citizens and not hurt our economy. As you probably know, free people are productive people, and it brings about prosperity, which is happiness, and we want them to be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Are there any other public comment in the room? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'm gonna switch it over to Zoom. Are there any public comment online?
There is not, no.
Okay. We'll bring it back to the board for this item. There was a suggestion given by the public. If there's any further discussion by the board members, open it up. Seeing none. So we have a plan in front of us, and we have staff here to, with a recommendation. Is there any motion to approve the strategic plan, 3-year plan?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Garamendi. Okay, second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Stopper. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, passes 5-0. Thank you, Robert, for everything. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just wanted to say thank you again. Congratulations, Supervisor Callaway, and all your years of service, and a wonderful retirement ahead of you. But I really appreciate each one of the board members. I think you were very diligent in what you did. It took a little while to get there because we had to build it, and but you were honest with me. You were very straightforward in your comments, and I appreciated that. And I think you made for a tremendous product here. So way to set that groundwork and that foundation here in Calaveras. Very good.
And Robert,
Yes,
you're
sir.
out of time. It's
Again, I just need to pay attention. I've been out of the game a while, Supervisor. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may. Robert?
Robert, you're not done.
Thank you for your comments. I mean, it's been over a year we've been working on this, and you know, you've been through a lot with us. It's not just working with the board and everything. We've been through a lot of transition and everything, and we're really looking to the future and setting our foundation with this, and we really appreciate you being a part of that.
My privilege.
Jack, do you have the?
I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to make sure so I don't get, okay. Thank you, Robert. We have a second part to discuss, which is discussion of the future of the Strategic Planning and Finance Committee and take possible action. So Supervisor Garamendi and I and the committee, Kathy's here in the room. Is anyone else on that committee here? We had a broad conversation on, now that this has been adopted, what is the future of the strategic planning and committee from the board? And if we're not in a position to make that decision today, at some time in the future, we would like more direction from the board. But where does the board want us to go? And part of the discussion at the committee was, you know, revisiting, do you want this committee to stay to revisit this over the next X amount of time, just to ensure that we're staying on course? Or do you want us to take a different route at this time? And so it's up for discussion and opinion from the board. We need direction from you. Ben?
You know, going through this process and the discussion, this isn't something to hit the bookshelf. We want to keep it out on the desk. We want it to be a valid, usable document that's not forgotten about on a bookshelf. With that, at the same time, there's an understanding, you know, every so often, we're looking at 2022 through 2025 on this. It's 3 years, but at the same time, 3 years is fluid. Things change. Now, I personally don't think that the committee may not need to meet as often, but I think the committee is valid in reviewing what's working during this time, what's not, where are we at for, you know, it may not be a quarterly meeting or a bi-weekly meeting or whatever. It may be an annual or a biannual meeting. But I think at that point, you know, from my perspective, this is not only is this a fluid document, it's a working document, and we have to continue to work on it.
Are there any other feedback from board members? Rita?
This is the second time today Ben and I agree.
Write that down.
I agree with Supervisor Stopper that I think the committee needs to exist. It might reformulate itself as you move on, but it will help the board and county staff stay on track.
Jack?
Thanks. We talked about this in the committee, and there are a lot of opportunities here. I mean, I agree it's a living document, and that 3 years moves always in front of us. And so we have to stay on that. That said, what are we going to do immediately? Because we have to implement some of this to see how it starts going. And one of the things we talked about was that this was a strategic planning and financing committee. And, we've got at a later agenda item here, we talk a lot about financing in this county, capital projects. Is that something that this board wants to take on as a whole or put in a committee? We've got issues around policy. When we originally formed this, we said we were going to take on policy. We decided we couldn't drink the ocean with a single cup, so we did prioritize and went after the strategic plan first, but policies are still out there. And we have to have policies in place to match the strategic plan. If we're pro-business, what are policies that may hinder that? If we want growth or health, what are policies that we need to enact or change? So there's still a lot of work to do, but I do think that this board should, if we decide to keep this committee going, should ask this board to focus on some of those pieces. Otherwise, it'll be too distributed, we won't get anything done. And then also, the question is going to come to Maria's point, who's going to serve on that committee? So there's still a lot. We've got a great product here, but it is just a first step. So that'd be my question to the rest of this board, how they want to go.
Okay, you have any?
I'm not opposed to continuing with this committee. I think this discussion probably should happen, as Jack said, when we decide who's going to stay on it, who's going to be on it when it comes to January, when we start dealing with committees and going forward with them. But I'm not opposed to it. I think again, the plan, there's a lot of things in here that shows needs to be done immediately, and some of them in the spring of 2023 and mid-2023 and going on to later in the fall of 2023 and winter of 2023, that's a pretty aggressive schedule to get a lot of those things accomplished. So without a committee delving into it and staying on it, then it would be the board that's trying to implement this all at once. And we meet every other week, or we meet, actually supposed to be meet 2 weeks a month, but we end up meeting 3, where the committee, if they need to meet, can call a meeting and have discussion on implementing and where they are on all of these projects that are in here. So I'm in favor of continuing with it, just to keep this thing going and implementing all the plans that are in it.
Okay, the CEO had a comment.
Yeah, and it's just a comment. With respect to the strategic plan, we talked about this during the committee, or the committee meeting, is that the intent is that staff will be putting, taking those first steps to implement the plan, and we'll be coming back quarterly with updates to the full board on how we're doing. So that's not to say, one thing or another about the committee, other than the staff will be moving forward and bringing you quarterly updates on the points in the plan.
Are there any other comment before I move it over to public? Okay, is there any public comment? Okay, none in the room, nothing, okay. Is there any online? There is not. Because I see a couple of people in the audience. If there's anything you want to say, tell us. No? Okay. All right. Doug.
Here it comes, because one of the items in here is very aggressive.
Doug Oliver, Chief Building Official, thank you. You coasted out of me. It's not to address the aggressive timelines, and I think I can speak for most of the department heads that see these timelines and say challenge accepted. I would, if I was to make a gamble at a recommendation, it would be that this committee slowly moves towards coordinating with department heads in alignment with the budget and the budget timeline, to be able to say, okay, these items are being brought forward and they are going to be budgeted for, and whether or not they're going to work in that year or not. Similar to other mechanics I've seen in the past, where there is a process before you bring to the board what you're what your budget's going to look like, pair it with, I've been through these committees and we have some consensus with the public, with our financing, with our strategic planning, something along that line where we can demonstrate to the board that the ideas in our budget have been vetted thoroughly and are acceptable within the framework of the strategic plan. In addition, I might recommend that the committee move more into forward planning and have more of a focus on how to arrange that forward planning communications so that department heads can communicate a year, 2 years in advance, slowly build into that strategic plan beyond 3 years. Are we going to look at a 2-year snapshot beyond that 3 years, a 3-year? I mean, as we get more confident, do we want to move further into 5 years, or do we want to keep it at, let's just do baby steps and hit it every extra year? So something to think about as far as development. You caught us whispering back there, but I think Craig hit the nail on the head pretty much, and so I'm just kind of adding a little bit of flavor to this conversation. Thank you.
Just smiling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, if there's no other comment, I'll bring it back to the board. We do need to take action on it, or how do we do that?
I think from my perspective, Madam Chair, the committee was formed as a standing committee, as a Brown Act committee, without sort of a finite end date or anything like that. So if the will of the board is to keep it going in largely, the same composition, then I don't think the board needs to take any action today.
Okay, is everyone okay? Is everyone on board with that?
Yeah, take a
From
poll.
council? Okay.
Yes, you could take a poll if you want to sound correct.
I would just hope that when we reform in the fall, in the winter, January, next month, and figure out how we want to staff this. So we may want to think about breaking it into two issues, two separate. One on sort of our capital programs and finance, and one on policy. And both of them have to match with what we do with the strategic plan, so they tear off of this. But I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. And we've got momentum, and I don't want to lose the momentum. And we're going to have major financing questions coming up this winter and spring. And so that's going to have to be one thing, and they're going to have to deal with the policy. So we may think about in January bifurcating the committee at some point.
Ben?
I was just say, don't run too fast, Robert. The check's in the mail.
And I have to agree with Jack on that. We had previously a committee that he's speaking of that we really got things done in. So I'm in agreement with that when we get to January.
Perhaps, this is just a suggestion, but perhaps the committee can convene in January, discuss what it thinks, might be what you just described, Supervisor Garamendi, something like that, and then bring a recommendation forward to the board. We can put something on the agenda early next year if you do in fact want to kind of split it or create a second committee or give them different tasks or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be great, and we should probably try to get that done before we select committees. And so I don't know, do we have enough time to get that done?
We might, I think the timeline, because this committee meets at toward the end of the month, we might be doing committee assignments before, so, which might be good, because if we rearrange it, then some of the thought process from other board members that are not currently on the committee, it might be a good moment to maybe shake it up a little bit, and then those ideas can really get into the committee suggestions, and they can help move that forward with those changes. But would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally up to you, but I think that if the committee wants to meet first in January and kind of bring a recommendation to the full board, and then.
Or we could just do it here. Right now?
That's, to the extent it's going to change either the composition or creating a new committee, I do think we need to bring a separate agenda item, unfortunately. I know, pesky Brown Act.
Process.
Thank you, Sarah. Robert?
Yeah, again, I don't have a light on, is it okay?
Yes, you're good.
Okay,
Yes, you stop.
I apologize. First of all, I think you're spot on, all the supervisors regarding the committee, and definitely keeping care of this and keeping it living and breathing. The second thing is I forgot to thank someone that was really important throughout the last year plus, and Jamie from the county administrator's office. I have to tell you, through scheduling and a little COVID here and a little bit of this there, and can we meet in person, can we not meet in person, some places being available, some not. I don't know how she did it, but she was really sort of my right arm in getting things done, and without her, I wouldn't have been able to get all of this coordinated with your board members and staff. So I just want to say thank you to Jamie for all of her help.
Thank you, Robert. So, no, Jamie did a lot putting up with all of us. A lot of juggling and schedules to juggle. So, okay, Ben, do you have anything?
Just one last thing. I mean, we're all really calm here, but, you know, as Ms. Callaway said, how long have you been talking about this since you got on the board in 1993? I'm sure they're talking about it beforehand. You know, this is done. I mean, Mr. Garamendi does bring up some good points. Our work isn't done, but this is the first step to getting a lot of these policies and following through on it. You know, again, this is our foundation. I want to thank you very much for, you know, keeping us in line and getting us going in the right direction, you know, and getting it so that the collaboration of the entire county, with the employees that you brought up, Jamie, from administration all the way to everyone that was showing up to those meetings and working together. I mean, it was a really good experience to have everyone working together from top to bottom and bottom to top. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we have direction for now for the second item. We don't need to do a vote. And we'll move on to the next agenda.
Thank you.
Bye, Robert. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is regular agenda item number 18, and I'll let the clerk read out.
Item number 18 is a resolution from planning, find project exempt from CEQA, conduct a public hearing, and adopt a resolution establishing agriculture preserve and Williamson Act contract number 390 for a total of 280 acres for Harold V. and Geraldine A. Hattler et al.
Before you speak, I need to open it up because it is a public hearing. So, public hearing open. Gina.
Good morning, everyone. Gina Cathan, County Planning. We've got our last two ag preserves for the season. Hooray, hooray. So right now you've got for consideration your California Land Conservation Contract Application 390 for the Hattler family. They ought to sound familiar. We've approved several other applications over the last couple years for them. This property is 280 acres comprised of two parcels, 160 acre and 120 acre parcel. Together, they meet the minimum 100 acre requirement set forth by Resolution 75-489, establishing rules for the Ag Preserve and Williamson Act. This property is located 7.5 miles west of Copperopolis, adjacent to the 707 acres of land you entered into the Ag Preserve for the Hattler family last year under Contract 381. This land has been in ag production for more than 60 years. Currently, the land is leased by Rex Whittle, who leases also the adjacent 707 acres. The ag operation consists of a total of 85 beef cattle. For purposes of this portion of the application, about 16 head generate a gross annual income of $8,320. As always, a feasibility study was conducted by Scott Oneto, our county farm advisor. which indicates the land can produce a gross annual income of $29.70 per acre. Both of these exceed the minimum requirements of $2,000, again set forth by Resolution 75-489. This property is designated by the County General Plan as resource production, which identifies lands capable of and primarily used for agricultural operations, and includes lands for conservation easements. This land is also noted as being in a very high fire hazard area of the county. Grazing livestock will reduce vegetation. In addition, restricting the land to agricultural uses reduces the land's development potential, minimizing the exposure of people to structures to the risk of wildfire. Wildlife is abundant, for some of which are protected species. Policies of the conservation and open space element of the general plan encourages open space for the preservation of natural resources such as wildlife habitat, in addition to the managed production of resources, including forests, rangeland, and agriculture lands. The area surrounding the properties is mostly designated resource production, and lands are zoned for intensive agricultural operations. There are thousands of acres specifically being utilized as for livestock grazing on this part of the county. Establishing a Williamson Act contract on this property is consistent with the surrounding zoning and land use. On October 24th, your appointed Agriculture Advisory Committee took under consideration the application and information provided by the Planning Department. They voted to recommend that you establish this contract. So in conclusion, staff finds that the proposal is consistent with the goals and policies of the County General Plan. Additionally, the California Land Conservation Contract application meets the minimum requirements set forth in Board of Supervisors Resolution 75-489. In addition to Chapter 17.18 of the County Zoning Code, staff's recommendation is that you establish Ag Preserve and Williamson Act Contract 390 for the Hattler family. Any questions?
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, can I open it up for public comment? Or do you need to? Okay, is there any public comment on this? I'm not seeing anyone in the room, so I'm gonna go to Zoom. Is there anyone on Zoom?
There is no public comment on Zoom.
Okay, this is a public hearing, and seeing that there's no public comment, we'll move it back to Gina if there's anything more.
I have nothing more.
Okay, with that, then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Ben?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, we got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Topanelli. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, 5-0. Next, we have agenda item number 19. If the clerk could please read out.
Item number 19 is an ordinance from planning. Number 1, find project exempt from CEQA. Number 2, authorize summary publication and a brief property description. And number 3, conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance amending the zoning of APN number 053-033-012 and 050-033-013 from general agriculture A1 to agriculture preserve AP for established agriculture preserve in Williamson Act contract number 390 totaling 280 acres for Harold V. and Geraldine A. Hattler et al.
And this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing now. Gina.
So now that you've established contract 390, the Ag Preserve Zone does apply to lands for which a Williamson Act contract has been executed and is consistent with the resource production land use designation. These parcels being 160 and 120 acres in size both meet the minimum size requirement of 50 acres set forth in the zoning code, the Ag Preserve zoning. On September 22nd, the Planning Commission, finding the zoning is consistent with the County General Plan, The County Zoning Code, Board of Supervisors Resolution 75-489, and the neighboring and adjacent land uses and zoning recommends that you adopt the zoning to AP upon establishment of the Williamson Act contract.
Are there any questions from the board? None? Okay. Is there any public comment from the room? Seeing none, is there any Zoom comment?
There is no Zoom comment.
There is no comment. Anything else, Gina, before I close the public hearing? No.
Nothing more.
Okay. At this time, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Moved by Stopper, is there a second? Second by Toffenali, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Next, we have agenda item number 20, if the clerk could please read out.
Item number 20 is a resolution from planning, find project exempt from SEQA, conduct a public hearing, and adopt a resolution establishing Agriculture Preserve and Williamson Act contract number 392 for a total of 1,172.21 acres for Tenniel Avila et al.
At this time, I'll open up the public hearing and turn it over to Gina.
The county received a California Land Conservation Contract application to establish Ag Preserve Williamson Act Contract 392 for a total of 1,172.21 acres of land located at 2010 Hunt Road in Copperopolis, approximately 2.5 miles west of the Hunt Road and Highway 4 intersection. The 1,172.21 acres is comprised of 5 assessor parcels and 3 legal parcels. Prior to the applicant's purchase of the land in July of this year, the property has been used as a retreat center since at least 1980. As such, improvements on the land include 2 houses, 1 shop, 2 cabins, a storage building, sleeping quarters, a swimming pool, 5 septic systems, and a private airstrip. They got a lot going on. The applicants plan to utilize the property as grazing land for 40 head of cattle, projecting a gross annual income of $8,000 from production annually. Feasibility study was conducted on the property, finding the land can produce a gross annual income of $29.70 per acre annually. Both of these exceed the minimum requirement of $2,000. The property is designated by the county general plan as resource production, which identifies lands capable and primarily used for agricultural operations. As we know, this also includes conservation easements. These parcels are not located in a general plan designated community area. Pursuant to Board of Supervisors Resolution 75-489, the 3 contiguous parcels totaling 1,172.21 acres are in common ownership, meeting the minimum requirement of 100 acres. The California Natural Diversity Database identifies the sightings of 4 different protected species within a 5-mile radius. Policies of the conservation and open space element of the general plan encourages open space for the preservation of natural resources, which includes wildlife habitat, in addition to the managed production of resources, including forest, rangeland, and agriculture lands. The subject property is being designated as very high and high fire hazard. As always, grazing cattle will reduce the vegetation, thus reducing fire hazard. The surrounding lands are primarily used for agriculture. Thousands of acres being utilized as agriculture land. Nearly all of the land west of Pool Station Road is designated resource production and working lands, as well as resource management. Zoning ranges from agriculture preserve to A1 general ag. North of the subject property lies the Circle 20 subdivision, which are all 20-acre parcels zoned rural residential. And directly to the east are parcels in the rural transition A, land use designation and zoned residential agriculture. AP, A1, as well as RA are all resource zones, permitting agriculture operations. And even though RR is a residential zone, the rural residential zone also allows agricultural operations, finding the proposed land use consistent with the surrounding areas. On August 24th, the Ag Advisory Committee met, taking under consideration the application and information provided by planning, and they voted unanimously recommending that you establish this contract. In conclusion, staff finds that the Ag Preserve and Williamson Act contract are consistent with the goals and policies of the county general plan, county zoning ordinance, and surrounding zoning and land uses. Additionally, the California Land Conservation Contract application meets the minimum requirements set forth in Resolution 75-489, as well as Chapter 1718 of the County Zoning Code. Our recommendation is that you establish this contract, 392, for a total of 1,172 acres. And any questions?
Is there any public comment in the room? Okay, seeing none in the room, is there any online?
No, there's not.
Okay, bring it back to the board. Jack?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm going to support this, but it's this question that came to mind when I was reading the packet last night. At what point does, this is to preserve ag lands and activities, this is primarily used as a retreat center, as I
It has
understand.
been, yes.
So at what point is it a retreat center, the primary activity, versus ag?
Well, for one, they're not planning on continuing the retreat center. I believe the retreat has been discontinued for more than 12 months. If they wanted to operate the property as a retreat, one, we would have to look for compatibility with the zoning. Two, we would have to evaluate it, take it to the Ag Advisory Committee to determine whether or not the retreat use might be a material breach of contract, because government code is very specific about the land being utilized for agricultural primarily. A retreat center could very well be seen as a non-compatible use.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that clarification. Marita?
Gina, I want to piggyback on what Jack asked. What about ag tourism?
Agritourism is another activity that is permitted in the Ag Preserve Zone. But again, any activity in an Ag Preserve and a Williamson Act contract would have to go before the Ag Advisory Committee for consideration. And depending on what that is, because, the proposals could be very wide-ranged, may or may not be determined to be compatible. And depending on what it is that's proposed, a consideration of whether or not allowing such use may or may not be considered to be a breach of contract.
But there's existing structures.
There's existing structures.
That would allow that,
I guess physically, yes, but again, they would have to get permission, so to speak. Even if we have a permitted use enumerated in the code, it has to go before the Ag Advisory Committee to determine whether or not it's a compatible use. So I think it's just, it pretty much is going to be compared to scale. What is the ag operation in scale of what it is that they're proposing? If anything, at this point, they have made no indication that they are thinking about or even considering moving forward with the previous uses. There's a lot of members of the family that are involved in this property, so they may very well determine to utilize the property for their own, purposes. After speaking with the applicants, it's my understanding that they are moving back here from Texas, and so they're relocating back to Calaveras County. I don't know, like I said, there's multiple members of the family that are on title, so they may just have plans of utilizing it strictly for themselves.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, then at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, 5-0. Okay. Move on to agenda item number 21. If the clerk could please read out.
Item 21 is an ordinance from planning. Number 1, find project exempt from SEQA. Number 2, authorize summary publication and a brief property description. Number 3, conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance amending the zoning of APNs 052-017-058, 052-017-059, 052-017-060, 052-017-077, and 052-017-078 from General Agriculture A1 to Agriculture Preserve AP for Agriculture Preserve and Williamson Act contract number 392 totaling 1,172.21 acres for Centennial Avila et al.
At this time, I will open the public hearing and turn it over to Juna.
So upon establishment of an ag preserve and California land conservation contract, the subject parcels are restricted. Restricted by that contract must be zoned to AP, ag preserve. The purpose of the ag preserve zone is to protect and preserve lands for intensive agricultural and ranching production. The minimum parcel size for new parcels in the ag preserve zone is 50 acres. The 1,172 acre ranch is comprised of 3 legal parcels, each greater than that 50 acre minimum. On November 10th, the Planning Commission, finding the zoning is consistent with the general plan and the county zoning code, in addition to the Board of Supervisors Resolution 75-489 and neighboring and adjacent land uses and zoning, recommends you adopt the zoning upon establishment of the contract.
Good? Okay. Is there any public comment? That was a quick one, that's why. Is there any public comment in the room? Okay, seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
There is not.
Okay, we'll bring it back if there's not any other staff or board member comments. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, we got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, we pass it 5-0. Thank you, Juna.
Thank you.
At this moment, we're going to take about a 5-minute break to allow staff to get set up. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We're on agenda item number 22. We're on agenda item number 22. If the clerk could please read out.
Item number 22 is an action item from the Administrative Office. Approval of Phase 1 budget adjustments to reduce general fund structural deficit requires a 4/5 affirmative vote of the board.
Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Craig.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board. It was immediately following the adoption of the 2022-23 final budget that your board charged me with trying to come up with a solution to the structural deficit that has plagued the county for the last several years and currently stands at about $9.4 million. You knew that that was necessary to put the county on a good, firm financial footing. And as I mentioned to you at that time, this didn't develop overnight, so it could take multiple phases and potentially multiple years, depending upon, how this works out as we move forward. So what you have here today is what I call, phase 1, or I've also referred to it as the first bite at the apple in trying to solve the structural deficit. So I'm going to try to work mainly off of, the charts on the screen. There are multiple things that we looked at in trying to begin working on this problem, and the first step involved looking at every single revenue line and every single expense line within the general fund where this problem resides. We're trying to maximize ongoing revenues and minimize ongoing expenses to begin the attack. This was aided greatly by a tool developed by Denise Hubner. It put together 5 fiscal years of budgeted and actual revenue and expense information. And using that tool, there were meetings with all general fund department heads. It was led by Assistant CAO Marcus Munoz. So up on the screen, who is that? Okay, well, moving on. Anyway, up on the screen, let me just talk about the structural deficit to begin with. What is that? We've covered this before, but for the public, the beginning balance, fund balance for the general fund was $10.4 million. That's a very healthy fund balance. It was mainly created through salary savings over a period of years with some other things. We also, to balance the budget in the final adopted budget, there was a transfer of one-time teeter funds in excess of $700,000. So combined, you had about $11.2 million of one-time money supporting the budget. Was any of that money, one-time money, used for one-time things? The answer is yes. Approximately $600,000 of that was used to transfer up to our general reserve to bring that up to the board's policy level, which is approximately $5 million. We also established contingencies at your policy level, which was approximately $1.2 million. So of that $11.2 million in one-time sources, those were $1.8 million of that was applied to one-time uses. So what was the real resulting problem? Approximately $9.4 million. If you look at that as a percentage of the general fund budget, which is $75 million, there you go, thank you. 9.4 million compared to the $75 million budget is about 12.5%. And like I reported before, I've not seen a general fund budget leverage so heavily in my career than that. So every 13 cents on every dollar, was from one-time sources that you can't count on, year after year. And that's where your board, basically said, fix it. So looking at, the phase one, our first effort, the first bite at the apple. Again, in step one, you can see where it mentioned the CEO staff budget review, working with all of the county general fund, department heads that had county general fund dollars in their cost centers. They looked at every single revenue line and every single expense line, looking for ways to increase the revenues or decrease the expenses in an ongoing manner. And up on the screen, it shows about $1.4 million was able to be found to increase our revenues on an ongoing basis, and then we were able to minimize about $1.8 million in expenses for a total of 3.2. Again, I'm rounding. Beyond that, we're also looking what other ongoing revenue options might there be. So we've talked about this for some time, moving teeter funds, which are also, it's a form of property tax, delinquent property taxes, back into the general fund. The teeter, it really is it's an ongoing revenue source. It's a form of property tax that years ago, the board saw fit by policy to have that go into its own fund where it could accumulate, and a number of capital improvements were, paid for through that fund. Everything from building projects to technology projects, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's also one of your very few ongoing revenue sources. So that's one of the things that was identified, that we could cease those transfers, from, actually have the teeter money come directly into the general fund rather than continue the practice of putting it into its own fund. We also found that liability expenses that are paid out of the general fund did not have the benefit of transfers in from a special revenue fund set up just to pay for things like general liability. It was a fund that had not been actively tapped. And so on an ongoing basis, we estimate that'll be about $350,000 a year that we can legitimately bring into the general fund to cover liability expenses paid from the general fund. Last week, we talked about the potential of restoring the cannabis excise tax and had that lengthy discussion, talking about options. And the conclusion of that discussion was to continue the temporary reduction in the property tax rate. So there's no real potential to do anything more with that particular revenue source. Another one that we've looked at is reevaluating the distribution of the TOT, and that's distributed between your fire agencies, the Visitors Bureau, Sheriff's Department, and the Road Department currently. There's other things that money can be used for per the language in the ballot measure. But that is a complicated thing because of prior commitments that were made. And I've just decided to put that off until the mid-year budget review and have more chance to talk with the board about that, and also all of the players that would potentially be impacted by any change. So that's still a live option, but I did not pursue it just to bring this to closure so I could bring this first bite at the apple to you. So if you put that all together, that's just a couple $1,000s short of $5 million of ongoing solutions to knock the structural deficit down from 9.4 million to approximately 4.4 million. And of that almost $5 million, roughly 3.2 of that is ongoing revenues between what we found in the line items in those operating budgets, plus the teeter, plus the special revenue, liability revenue funds. So that's about 63% of that almost $5 million improvement came from revenues, and the balance, from reductions in expenses. So something I've mentioned to you in the past, I also refer to this as peeling back, the layers of an onion too, and other different ways you can talk about it. We're trying to expose what's our core problem, and that would put the core problem again at about 4.4 million. So assuming the board is okay, with these changes, then what do you do, with what's happened here is we've replaced one-time money, primarily fund balance, with ongoing solutions, either reductions in expenditure lines or increased revenues. So what that's done is it's freed up that one-time fund balance. And we do not really want that to carry on into the general fund, but feel it's very appropriately used, a one-time revenue source to one-time purposes. So what's proposed is that we take this 739,000 of it, rounding, to remove the one-time teeter transfer that was brought in when you adopted the budget. We don't need that anymore, so we return that transfer, covering it with the ongoing revenue. We double contingencies. I'll come back to that in a moment, but we've been able to double that. And then the rest is proposed to be transferred, into capital improvements. On the contingency front, this is a very important point to all the department heads, because again, we're doubling it there. One of the reasons we're doing that is to provide additional buffer to help meet unanticipated needs or opportunities. It's not always needs. Sometimes a special good opportunity, a grant program that comes in that needs a match that's really beneficial for the county, may develop amongst general fund departments. And what it also provides is, what is important to the departments, is assurance that such needs and opportunities could be met. That's just important to the department heads to know that that money can be used. Because part of what's happened here over the years is there's actually been, to some extent, I've heard it a couple different ways, that folks were encouraged to actually build mini contingencies in their departmental line items rather than have it go into a single contingency account. I think some of that's also been a little bit due to just a little laxness in the way things have been budgeted here. But whatever the reason, the departments are, there have been a number of them share the concern that if we do consolidate everything, the real contingencies within the one account, that if the needs are bona-fide, that the board will be receptive to approving adjustments, within their cost centers. What I'm accustomed to, and this was I've mentioned to the departments, is that when there's a department that is having a problem or facing an opportunity, that's reviewed with the county administrator's office, and we'll look at that to see if it's truly a need as opposed to a want or a desire. It's a need, and that will help determine whether or not the department has any means within their existing line items to cover that expense. Can they cover any of it? A portion, all of it, but if not, and it's a bona fide need, then our office would typically stand side by side with the department head with a recommendation to the board to fund that from contingencies. So that's very important as we're trying to change how we do this procedurally, and it's a change in the culture as how we do budgets, as focusing contingencies within the one account rather than the department cost centers. So the board needs to be willing to buy into that process, that use the county exec's office to prove those needs and determine whether there's any ability to cover those needs out of department budgets. To the extent they're short and it's a bona fide need, then my office would come to you with a recommendation to support it. And within reason, of course, the board, would be inclined to approve those. And I'm speaking generically here. Generally, I know it depends on the items that come before you, but I think I want to provide emphasis on that because that's very important to the departments and buying into what we're doing here. Let me just pause there and see if there's any questions on that.
It's more, I think, a comment. The process for departments becomes somewhat bureaucratic and complicated. So if you, let's say you can't, I'll just use the DA, can't find positions, it's taking longer. So the end of the budget year comes, the funding rolls back into the general fund. Now the DA finds somebody, do they have to go through that process to hire somebody or to get that position funded?
Unless, excuse me.
Oh, no. So that was one, and I know we did a parking lot system, and then that parking lot system was disbanded. But it just seemed like, okay, I don't have it, the money rolls back to the general fund, the beginning of the budget year, now I've got somebody, I have to go through this bureaucratic process.
Yeah. Can I address that?
Yes.
Yeah, in a case you're describing an approved position that just was vacant at the end of the fiscal year, you're correct that the savings would fall to fund balance, and that's sure enough. But unless the board has directed a reduction in the position to eliminate the position will be rebudgeted into the next year. It'll be rebudgeted. They would not have to have hat in hand, to ask to reestablish the position. It's going to be there. It would be funded unless your board takes a positive action to remove it.
Okay, so if they have vacant positions, those positions can be funded even though they're not filled, if they're approved positions.
Right. Yeah, it would take an action of this board to remove those positions. Otherwise, they would be put back into the budget.
So we talked earlier, positions that haven't been filled because we can't find people to fill them. Is that something that they budget for, or is that okay, we can't find a registered environmental health officer, the funds go back into the general fund?
Well,
At what point?
that would be part of a purposeful budget action, and that would be a discussion initially between the the department head and my office. And out of that would come a recommendation, one way or another, to the Board of Supervisors. But there's, again, it would take some positive action by the board to remove a position. Otherwise, it'll be refunded in the upcoming fiscal year budget.
So great, so what is rolling to the general fund?
Just the unspent money at the end of the year, which is the main reason why we had a $10.4 million carryover this year. We can't fill the positions right now.
So we can't fill it, the money rolls into the general fund.
Right.
Now the department submits their budget
Right.
with that same funding that the funds just rolled back into the general fund.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is to make it so that rather than fund those positions with salary savings, we want to fund it with ongoing revenue it'll be a balanced budget. So in totality of the budget, ongoing expenses will not exceed ongoing revenue. It will not be dependent on one-time money, which is unpredictable. Okay. All right. All right, let me move forward. And let me stop here and just say, this is where I did want to pause and say thank you to all of the department heads for their cooperation in this. We promised that we had no intent to go after, positions, to impact positions or impact programs. I think we held to that, but we couldn't have done it without their help. And also, again, just a nod to, Marcos and Denise and their hard work as well. So getting beyond, the balancing, trying to knock down the structural deficit, then we're also looking for any other kind of one-time sources that may be out there, not to apply them to ongoing expenses, but to take any new ongoing revenues or savings and then to apply those to one-time uses. And again, you're going to hear that a lot from me. Ongoing revenue matching ongoing expense, one-time revenue going towards one-time expense. So one-time revenue that just came in the last month or so from the federal government was called the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Grant Fund. And that was tied to counties that had, this is federal, and any jurisdiction that received PILT funding. This was a one-time call out, and as you saw in the staff memo, very flexible on how that money can be used. But again, it's one time. Back to talking about salary savings, I wanted to point out under that subheader, salary savings, you see projected salary savings from vacancies. I'm highlighting that, and looking at the positions that are vacant right now, talking with the department heads, talking with HR. We put the positions are still in the budget, but we've predicted how much longer would a position be vacant. Therefore, how much savings could be seen from vacancies this fiscal year in the general fund, and it's just a tad over $4 million. Below that, you see this other line. It says adjustments for budgeted salary savings, and there's a couple, sub-account numbers in there. That's where, in this year's budget, we put in a negative number that was kind of like in lieu of a detailed vacancy calculation. So it was a number that was put into every operating budget. It totaled, again, I'm just rounding here, $2.7 million. So we're projecting we're going to have a little over 4. The budget already had a negative offset for 2.7. The difference being about that 1.3 additional salary savings than what we had predicted, when you adopted the budget, just a couple months ago. So if you take that one-time revenue, that grant, plus the increase in anticipated savings from vacant positions, that gives you just over $2 million of one-time funding that could be utilized. And again, in keeping with one-time money for one-time uses, the proposal is to take that and apply it to capital projects. Let me switch over to the next. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to cover here. I do want to mention, when I say capital projects, the ones that, there's always a lot of different things that we're looking at in the capital world, but in the area of building, right now, there's 4 major things that are out there. One is an upgrade of the electrical plant for this campus, and that's going to be somewhere around $1 million. There's some supply chain issues that are affecting that. And then you also have an item that'll come to your board, your next meeting, is we're actually going to be going out to bid, for the construction of the new cell out at the Rock Creek landfill. And just not to get ahead of that item, but it's a little over $10 million to construct that cell. They have a little under $7 million from another fund that was set aside years before to help fund that cell. But we're going to need a little over $4.1 million of capital dollars to supplement, to provide gap funding to fully fund that cell. Why is that important? If we don't build that cell, we're going to run out of space and we'll not have a place locally to dispose of garbage. So it's fairly urgent, and the staff is on top of that, and that item to approve plans and specs and call for bids will come next week. So that's an important one. And then these aren't in any rank order per se, but then we have the district attorney's new building that we've been talking about for years, and also the animal control building that's been talked about for years. And just as a footnote, for board direction, we did put, you'll see those in your strategic plan specifically called out, saying that there is a commitment to move forward on these buildings. And also next week, there'll be an item on your agenda which is approving a request for qualifications for architects to work on both of those projects. So that's the first step of tangible progress towards those projects. So that's really, those are the 4 big ones, and then there's a whole bunch of little things that we have to do in the course of work. Okay, moving on. So if we do all this is very hard to see, so I'll just have to refer you to, if you can't see that, refer you to Exhibit D in your packet online. But what this shows, there's something on mine, I can't read my own, there, got it. It's showing at the very top of, excuse me, there's 5 funds that are called out here. The first one is the Teeter Fund. As it's currently budgeted, the first column of numbers shows a large fund balance in there of $7.5 million. It shows about a 1.4 revenue. It shows a transfer out to the general fund. That's the one that's for our operating budget. And then it shows project expenses. And that big project expense line is the $4.1 million for the landfill, that gap funding. And the balance is the 2.15, which is a myriad of different plant projects that Marcos could regale you, with the details of. The difference is, we would be finishing or closing out that fund this year, finishing off the 2.1 million of the smaller projects, and then moving the balance. We would not be moving any more Teeter, into that fund. That's the column on the right. And then the transfer of the general fund would be eliminated. So that would leave a balance of just under $5.4 million that would be transferred down to a new capital fund, which is the one here at the bottom. That's the last one. It's a new capital fund. It shows the $5.4 million being transferred down from Teeter. If you take the capital money that I showed you a couple slides back, coming out of our first bite at the apple exercise, and also that the one-time source money, you see a little over $5 million coming in from the general fund. And then you can see very cleanly the money for the landfill at the 4.115. So that's how that works. Otherwise, the the American Rescue Plan money. We've gotten both allocations of that. We do have just some initial project expenses against that. That doesn't reflect, the cost of projects. It's just what we're spending or think we're going to spend this year. So there's no change between those two, but a significant amount of money, 8.7 plus million. PG&E settlement, we have things that we've almost, exhausted our responsibilities there for specific things. But we're projecting somewhere around 1.9 million that could be used to help fund capital projects. There's a judicial construction fund that has a little over $1 million in it. That money that's the only dedicated money in here that would go specifically to the DA building. But if you look at the very bottom, if we just kept doing what we're doing, we would have amongst all those funds about $13.5 million set aside at the end of this fiscal year. But doing what I'm proposing that you do, you'll end up at the end of this fiscal year with something just shy of $18 million to help fund all of those different projects. So this is the power of trying to follow that discipline, one-time expenses paid with one-time money, ongoing revenue paying for ongoing expenses. And if you maintain that discipline, and I would suggest that you continue following this kind of a practice in the future when you have carryover dollars in your general funds to put it to work in your capital budgets. That is the best way to go to have a healthy result in the long run. So, in summary, if all recommended Phase 1 actions are approved, the board will have reduce the general fund structural deficit, I'm going to round by $5 million or 53%, from 9.4 million to 4.4 million without impacting staffing or programs. Secondly, you would have increased the general fund contingencies from 1.2 million to 2.4 million. And lastly, increase set-asides for capital improvement projects by a total of 5 million plus. By taking these actions today that don't have any negative impacts on your staffing levels or on programs. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, I'm going to start with the board. Are there any questions from the board? Ben?
A few things. I talked to you about earlier, Mr. Pedro, salary savings and vacancy savings. These are one and the same right now, 10105801 or 5801 on the org key. So can you clear that up? Because I mean, a lot of this has to do with salary savings and vacancy savings and everything. Right. So you clear that up for me.
Yeah, as far as the one-time, money, again, this is going to be a practice we want to change moving forward, that when you budget in the future, we'll look at any vacant position as we budget going in, and we'll make adjustments in the salary and benefit line items where it should be shown. In the past, we've used the shorthand method of let's just arrive at an estimate and put a lump sum dollar in there, and that's what I put that chart back up on the screen. In the accounts that you just mentioned, the 5801 and 5400, those were estimates. But we're basically washing by two entries to get to a net of what we're actually going to see by way of increased salary savings. It's complicated, it is cumbersome to even say it, because this isn't the way it really should be done. We ought to just have this budgeted right into the salary and benefit lines. But right now, we're having to do this big, netting of expenses. I don't know if that answers the question. I don't know if Marcos or someone could answer it better than that.
I understand. But, if Marcos wants to elaborate on that any further, I'm more than happy to hear it.
Good afternoon, Marcos Munoz, Assistant CAO. So in our budget, we have a line item 5801, and this line item was specific to a 5.3% that was put in the budget as a negative number, essentially to account for possible vacancies throughout the year. Additionally, we have 5,400 where departments themselves also budgeted vacancies that they may see throughout the year. So together, those line items, I believe it was about $2.6 million, which were already accounted for in the budget. We, Denise, myself, and the admin team went through and we looked at a real-time budgeting of positions. So if the position was vacant, we looked at, okay, when is a potential time for the position to be filled, and looked at that gap to come up with a more accurate costing for the vacancy number. In that, we came up with a total of roughly $4 million. So when we looked at our numbers of $4 million, and this assumed that every position would be filled at some point in time this fiscal year, we had $4 million. We took into account that $2.6 million was already budgeted, so the net was about 1.3 and change. And so that's how we came up with that number.
Excellent, thank you. And these are conversations we've had in the past about cleaning this up. I'm glad we're moving forward with it now. It's quite confusing trying to go into that in the year. I think the new approach will help us a lot in the future going into it. But general revenues. Here you have about $2.8 million that's going back into the general fund. Now, thank you for the explanation on the local assistance and tribal consistency fund grant. That confused me at first when I look at a federal grant that's going into the general fund, but it's very lenient on how we can use that as money, so that's good. But with this, excise taxes, for example, here we're saying we're going to be receiving $1 million more than we projected. Consistently, we moved into our revenues with a fiscally conservative approach, just because we don't have a crystal ball and aren't able to see the future. So with this $2.8 million minus the $662,000 for the federal grant, how can we justify being the 6th month in a year projecting that these are going to go up by $2.8 million and be comfortable with that?
Well, the excise tax, that's, again, to be clear, that had nothing to do with our action your board's action last week. That was there was a very conservative estimate made when the budget was first constructed, and we almost met that, this month, halfway through the year. So, we feel comfortable with that, with that $1 million bringing us a total of 2.8, which is still less than we received the prior year. Sales and use tax, we feel comfortable with that number. It was, I remember when Marcos was presenting that, he mentioned that it was, conservative, it could be better, and it seems to be that it is coming in better. Same thing with franchise. The penalties, secured taxes at your teeter, and that's based on, the trends that we're seeing. So that's looking good. Where you talked about the one-time grant, again, we're eliminating, the transfer from teeter, and then just a small adjustment in the settlement and adjustment. So that feels like a good, solid number.
Okay. Basically, everything else you've explained with but it's, going into general revenues, typically a fiscally conservative approach is the safest,
right,
just because, with the fluctuation in the market, who knows what's happening in May.
Right. Just to jump on the revenue discussion a little bit, because in the discussion with department heads, they're asking, we thought you'd mentioned, when you started this exercise, you're going to look for revenue solutions. And we really have. And, back to the improvement in the structural deficit, like I said, about 63% of that is new revenue, or realigning, in some cases, revenue like teeter, as an example. In the staff report, mentioned, there's going to be, this is phase 1. Phase 2, we want to bring that back to the board in conjunction with the mid-year budget review at the end of February. And we will be looking at a number of revenue sources, like I'll bring back the TOT for discussion, bring back a discussion of what's available potentially in your special revenue funds. Kathy Gomes has been very helpful in helping us walk through that. And also, talking, with the sheriff's office, they should have approved contracts for that additional jail bed money that they've, spoken about. And, so we look forward to full budgeting of that new revenue source. That, again, the sheriff went out and found. So good for them. That doesn't mean that's the only thing we'll look for in phase two. We'll look for other opportunities. But you can hear where I'm going. I'm looking for revenue solutions rather than expense reduction solutions to the extent that I can. After that, then we'll just have to look at both sides of the equation, getting into a third phase, revenues and expenses, and just take, a gauge of the board, how aggressive do you want to be one way or the other? Is this something that we can resolve as you prepare the 23-24 fiscal year budget, or is that something that should be spread out, for maybe an additional year? So the job isn't done. I think we've made great progress. And again, thanks to the department heads for their hard work and teaming with us and putting that together. And I'm not done yet. We're going to see what we can do to keep whittling this thing down.
The last question I had was pertaining to the next cell in the landfill that you brought up and the maneuvering of contingencies in Teeter here. So you allocated a certain amount to that, and that's going to be brought before us next week. So now it fluctuates. That we were in somewhere in the vicinity of $7 million for the landfill. That was specific money, and we know that we have to take a look at our fees over there, which is one of our revenue sources,
right?
Although specific, and that we were running a structural deficit with the landfill at the same time. So next week, when that's brought before us, will we see numbers based on what the proposal is and everything else, or
Well, the cost side, you'll have the engineer's estimate that breaks it all down. The almost $7 million, that's a set number that's in cash on hand right now. The balance, and this is all for the one time, covering the cost of the project. The other would be the 4.115, that would be
Right.
coming as I've outlined. And then later in the year, back to you were talking about fees, they do. I'm sure you recall that the board's approved that we have consultants on board that are looking at all of our fees, and those should be brought back for board action by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Jack?
Thank you, Craig. And this is great. I mean, we took the first bite of the apple, as you said. We took care of some low-hanging fruit. I want to make sure that before we move the funds through this action item on the PG&E settlement, we've got a contingency on 5990. This board set aside for an audit by the Inspector General.
Right.
And so I'd kind of like to make sure we're good with our auditor controller and our budget, that we feel like we've cleared that liability or potential liability before this is what we set it aside for.
Right.
I'm not opposed to it. I just want to make sure that before we do that, we're good.
Yeah, that's why it's shown as a negative. Those are all set-asides, so we don't spend any of that.
Okay, so that's set aside, all right.
It's a
great.
set-aside.
Right. Denise has given us such a great accounting of PG&E funds. I actually feel like I know where everything is, so thank you, Denise. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other board questions? None? Okay. I'm going to take this opportunity to now move it over to any staff. Is there any staffers before I have a public comment, so we can make sure they have time? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, honorable members of the board. Under Sheriff Rochelle Whiting with the Sheriff's Office. Our elected Sheriff Rick DiBasilio is with us online as well via Zoom. if it's allowed, or if we can open up Rick's link to allow him to comment. Since we're in person, he asked me to comment on this item.
Rick, I believe you're unmuted. Can you switch him so we can see him? Hold on, we're gonna get you up on the screen here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. There you are. Okay. You're up, Rick.
All right. Oliver, shall go ahead and start, and if I need to dig in, I will. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. We appreciate the work that the County Administration Office, Marcos and Denise and everyone that did to figure out possible one-time savings to reduce the structural deficit. The CEO has been talking for some time about this first bite of the apple, so we finally get to see what that entails. It's unfortunate we only had a couple of short weeks to review the proposal. However, we were able to meet several times with the county administration staff. And what you have before you today is a result of a lot of work that went into reviewing this and what was brought to you today. The Sheriff's Office is one of the larger county departments, both in number of employees and the budget. The total amount of what's being referred to as budget changes is a reduction in our Sheriff's Office budget totaling just a little over $1.7 million for this year's budget. If reducing the structural deficit, with all due respect to contingency planning and capital projects, if reducing the structural deficit gets us any closer to giving our employees the raises that they deserve, then the sheriff is willing to work with staff as a part of this collaborative effort to figure that out. Just to reiterate what the CEO said earlier, the majority of the money that's being captured out of the Sheriff's Office budget today is from salary savings and contingency planning. With the removal of that contingency money from our budgets, we've already expressed to the CEO's office and that we will try and work together if things come up that we no longer have in our budget. That means if there are any extensive prisoner transports, need for helicopter services, long-term hospitalization of inmates, or any major facility repairs, that's something that we can't plan for, but we had built in, as the CEO referred to, as many contingencies into our budget. Today, this removes a lot of that money back out of it, so if any of those things come up, we will have to work with staff to get funding back for that. As most of you are aware, costs for some of the jail repairs, if they have happened, have been very high. If we have any emergency repairs to major components, such as the chillers or the boilers, we do have an obligation to stay in compliance with Title 15 and Title 24 for the proper care and custody of our inmates. So we are hoping not to run into any bureaucratic delays if we have to dip into contingencies. So hopefully we don't have to, because transporting and housing inmates elsewhere can become extremely costly. Some of the line items have been reduced in our budgets, so it's not catastrophic, but to take out $700,000 from our budgets and say it's going to have absolutely no effect on services and programs isn't completely accurate. Some purchases may not be able to be accomplished, or we may just delay them until the next fiscal year. Reducing line items based solely on comparisons over the last 5 years budget to actuals, it doesn't take into account inflation. It doesn't take into account the supply line shortages that we've dealt with over the last couple years, and it doesn't take into account this year's actual needs. We are willing and are going to do our best with the reduced amounts. We are hoping this budget reduction does not impact services and programs. We also hope that the administration office and the board keeps this in mind when considering any future budget changes and the amount of funding that's already being removed from our budgets. With reduced staffing this year, yes, there is a lot of salary savings, but also with reduced staffing on patrol, in the jail, and especially in dispatch, we're accumulating more overtime than recent years. This coupled with some major incidents and unplanned events come up, some of the fires that we responded to at the beginning of this fiscal year, the officer-involved shooting last month. Those are things that we are working hard on projecting and forecasting our overtime amounts, but we still have 6 months of the year left. So we had planned on the salary savings in our budget to cover what we are projecting for our overtime. With removing those salary savings, we just want to make sure that the board knows at mid-year we will most likely be requesting an increase in budget allocation to our overtime. We understand this is the first bite of the apple. We are hoping the next phase does not include reducing our budgets further, and that could potentially have more of an adverse effect on our operations, and especially not to reduce any positions. We've been working very hard on recruiting and trying to fill the open deputy sheriff positions. I've been told our current deputy staffing level is lower now than it was in 1985. This is 2022. For how much we're asking current law enforcement to do, it's our duty to do everything we can to fill those open positions and to get the deputies on the street. Right now, we have 8 deputies in police academies that will start the training program on patrol in the spring. The county administrative office is taking that into account. The budget changes today will not change that. We will be filling those positions as the deputies graduate the academy and bring them to Calaveras. The budget changes today. We just hope that we continue to keep the ability going into the end of this year and into next year, as Marita pointed out, to fill those vacant positions. So that's all that we want to comment on. Sheriff, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing I want to make sure that the board is aware that the process that we're doing right now, and we've been working very well with the human resources and recruiting and getting our folks into the academy, is if we reduce any of the positions, it's going to cause a problem with our game plan, because our game plan is to continue to put people into the police academy and get them hired on so that we can fill all of our positions. And if I end up being overfilled on the recruit side, I will be telling these folks that, look, we'll put you into the academy, but we're going to start you in the jail. So that not only will keep our patrol staff full, it will allow my jail staff levels to go up, which again is key. And then when we have somebody who leaves the patrol side, we have an automatic fill, so we're not that 6 months to a year behind like we have in the past. So I just want to make sure we caution the board that please do not take any of my positions away when the second or third bite of this apple comes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Do you have anything else, Michelle? You good?
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Are there any other staff? Corey?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Corey Allen, Health and Human Services. I really just wanted to provide you just a very brief summary of some of the maybe concerns, but ways in which we will address this potential impact to the Health and Human Services Agency budget. We will do our best to meet the public need with an adjustment of $264,000 to the Public Guardian program. There will be some changes in the way in which we will be able to do this work. Your board is aware we are 6 months into this fiscal year, and so adjusting the funds away at this point is going to create a significant pivot. I've already scheduled meetings with my teams, 2 of them this week, where we will be making an adjustment because the assumption about how much money is banked in order to conduct the work that we anticipated over the past 6 months, moving into the final 6 months of this year, is closer to $50,000. Now, luckily in Health and Human Services, we are flexible in how we can allocate resources, but the probate side of the Public Guardian program that this funding supports is not a mandated service. It's an added service, and so therefore my mandated program funding can't be shifted. There's a lot of restrictions around that. I do want to say that the effort, look at my notes just for a minute here, please. We spend about $100,000 per year on the housing costs of the constituents that we serve who are conserved. So we'll have to make some adjustments to that. So the reason for my speaking to you today is to let you know that we are up for the task. The MA dollars is the discretionary dollars, and that's Medi-Cal Administrative Activity Funds. Those funds, we draw them down by time study, and many of my divisions can draw that dollar down. We use that as discretionary dollars, highly restricted within what that discretion looks like, but each division currently receives their own MA dollars to use as their department needs. This effort may ask that I go and ask them to pool those dollars. So there's just slight impacts that we will see internally, and I just need to put that on the record that we will do our absolute best to not come back and ask for the general fund in this program in the future. My goal is to make this palatable and workable, and it will just take some adjustments in how we do this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any others? Kathy?
Oh, I've been waiting for Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Good morning. Madam Chair, members of the board, I just want to thank you so much for your vision and the direction that you've provided, really the county and the constituents in approving the strategic plan. This now before you is a very important step in making that strategic plan come to life. It's going to create funding for the future. So I want to thank the administrative office and the staff in meeting with all of the department heads, including myself, in finding ways that we can reduce the structural deficit and kind of redirect our focus and direction. So thank you, and I encourage you to consider approving this.
Thank you, Kathy. I just want to do one more. Are there any other staffers before I go to the public comment? I'm not seeing anyone in the room. Just to verify with the clerk, is there anyone raising their hand for staff?
There is not, no.
Yeah, I'm not to public comment yet. Okay, so staffers, there's no raised hand for staff?
There is not.
Okay, so at this time, I will move it to public comment, and I'm going to start in the room, and then we'll move back over to Zoom. Okay, so at this time, we have public comment, and please be mindful of the light on the podium. Thank you.
Okay, thought I'd join you guys in person today. Good morning. My name's Andrea Colavita-Pinkham, and I'm the field representative for SEIU 1021. I represent over 300 workers here in Calaveras County, workers who keep this county running, provide direct services to its taxpayers and its most vulnerable residents. So I take a little bit of exception with the statement that staffing will not be impacted with phase one approach. Every vacant position that's not filled, a taxpayer is not being served, and a county employee is continuing to be overworked. Your workers will have to endure having to do the work of 2 to 3 people for the foreseeable future. The numbers may look nice and pretty on a spreadsheet, but there are real-life consequences to your decisions and the words you choose to use. So I'm going to paraphrase last week something that Mr. Pedro had said. He said he knew the market rate of what a good CEO was. And that's what justified the over $8,000 raise was necessary for that recruitment to happen. You guys spend over $90,000, and who knows how many hours to find out what the market rate for your workers and who directly provide services for your community. Yet you chose to prioritize executives over the ones who keep your county running. There are currently 56 vacant positions within our bargaining unit alone. Okay, this includes several public health nurses, social workers, road maintenance workers, library branch assistants, a fire prevention inspector, mental health clinicians, and that's just to name a few. So I guess it's not relevant what the market rate is to recruit and retain those positions, as long as we get our CEO. Be aware of the message you're sending your employees in your community. Whether you intend to or not, you're telling them that they get to keep plowing away and not receiving services while the board prioritizes executive pay. You get to just shrug your shoulders and say, can't fill the positions now.
Are there any public comment in the room? Okay. Seeing none, I'll move over to Zoom.
There is no public comment on Zoom.
Oh, okay, thank you. We'll move it back to the board. Jack?
Thank you. I just have a quick question. As we look at the next bite of the apple, I don't want to get too far ahead, but we're looking at this 4.3. That's on the 2022-23. That's where we sit today. So that number doesn't take into account the salary increases that we've already negotiated and come to terms with all our unions going forward, right? So that number is going to go up, I'm assuming. Just trying to figure out how we're going to begin getting our arms around the next bite.
Yeah, the COLA increases that were intended for this year are built into the numbers that we're dealing with for this year. But yes, we'll be adding about $2 million a year for the next 3 years based on the existing contract.
$2 million?
Roughly.
Existing contracts.
Contracts, correct.
Those are already
Right.
cooked.
Baked into the cake.
Thank you.
I'm going to piggyback off of Jack's question. So with that already calculated into the future, that does not consider revenue with all of the other expenses going forward yet. That's what phase 2 is going to be about, is how to continue to spend that along with all the other capital projects with the new additional revenue that you spelled out, like re-evaluating TOT. Ben brought up the landfill fees to keep that open and operational. So that's going to be part of to support that and find other revenues.
Right, we've got to reach level with what we've already committed to, balance it, but then moving forward, whatever you approve in the 23-24 fiscal year, we need to make sure we have the ongoing revenue to cover that ongoing expense, which is going up.
Thank you. Marita?
Since this is the last time I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to the sheriff about his budget, I want to reiterate what the CEO said. This will not impact positions, and any positions that are budgeted, any positions that exist have been budgeted and would be in the future. Unless I didn't hear you correctly, unless the board chooses to cancel a position, they will be budgeted.
That's correct.
Getting back to the sheriff, I have to say the dialogue is a lot different than I've heard in the past. Both he and the undersheriff have said hope versus will. I thought that was a positive step. And could have versus will have. In the past, it's always been doom and gloom and rape and pillage if you cut our budget. And now it is, we hope that we can contribute to the structural deficit. And if we need help, then we'll be able to come forward and ask for it. And I think that's really positive. I'm happy to hear that. So, Sheriff, thank you. I hope you have somebody looking at your budget next year.
Ms. Callaway, if I could, for the past 6.5 years that I've been your folks as sheriff, as you well know, I've worked very well with all of you, and I've we'll continue to do that. I just throw caution to the wind in the sense that I'm always optimistic. However, I still need to make sure that I protect all our constituents out there. And I know that you guys have always done the right thing and will continue to do that. And it's been a pleasure working with you. I'm sorry I won't be there for your send-off next week. But I want to say thank you very much for working with me and giving me that fifth vote or that fifth yay. I appreciate it.
Rita, do you have? Thank you, Rick.
Madam Chair, if I could just mention, I do want to, I think, again, I've already thanked all the department heads, but I will say that the discussions I've had with the sheriff and his staff, they've been honest and direct and constructive, and that's where we want to keep it.
Are there any other board members? Okay. I just would like to say thank you to all the staff and department heads. I came and talked to you a couple weeks ago at a department head meeting, and I'll say the same thing as I said there. This is not comfortable, this is not easy, and no one's happy. And we've heard you, and at the same time, we thank you for your ability to work with the CAO's office so we can start doing what we just passed earlier. Because at the end of the day, we can't do this without you, and we're not done. And I hope to work with the CAO's office and each of the department heads to have that meaningful, constructive conversation and being direct and honest. And as we move forward, we really not only hope to support you individually, but as a county as a whole to ensure that we're providing the facilities, not only that for your staff, but also for constituents to come and to do your jobs easier. But it's going to take some uphill battle before we can see this all level out. So again, thank you for your working ability to work with all of us to get to this first step as we continue with this conversation. So with that, we do have, this is an action item. So I'm going to ask for if there is a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move this item. I think I want to thank the CAO and the administrative staff and all the department heads that have been collaborating and working together across the county. This is part of our word moving forward so that we can address those salary issues from the bottom legitimately, moving forward. So this is our first step to keeping our word, and we're going to build off of this. And I think this is going in the positive direction, so we can address everybody when it comes to salaries moving forward. So that's my motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'd like to make a second, and I'd like to make a comment that I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it and the partnership with all our department heads. It's pretty impressive. We now have a strategic plan, which I think will guide our budget choices, because that's what we're going to be facing next, is putting our priorities to the numbers. And I think that will be a harder lift, and we're all going to have to make those hard choices. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. It's amazing how we've moved from September to December and been able to get this in order. And with that, Madam Chair, I second the motion from Supervisor Stopper.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, 5-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have supervisor announcements, and I'm going to start with Supervisor Callaway.
Last Saturday, I was at the Valley Springs Parade. I want to thank Supervisor Stopper and Tuffanelli for a really great event. It was a lot of fun being there and seeing. In fact, I even ran into people I knew, which was somewhat surprising. But it's nice when supervisors get out of our little districts and go elsewhere. So y'all did a really good job. I had a Mountain Counties Air Basin meeting and we hadn't met in 2 years, and really what we did was approve the budget, which hasn't changed in 2 years. So there is no cost to the county going forward. And that's it in terms of requirements. Thank you.
Supervisor Graham-Indy?
I will be attending RCRC, Golden State Connect Authority, Golden State Finance Authority, and all the other authorities that sit under the RCRC banner tomorrow. Should be a very long day. That's all I have to report, but I would like to encourage everybody to shop at your local stores as we go into this holiday season. There is no more COVID life preservers out there for anybody, so get out and support your local businesses. Thank you.
Vice Chair?
I have a Mountain Counties EMS agency meeting on Thursday. We'll be discussing a lot of things, and I'll report back on the 13th on the outcome of that meeting.
Doctor?
I would like to reflect Ms. Callaway's words when it came to the parade. Thank you, Gary, for working with the owners of Grocery Outlet and the Valley Springs Business Association, putting that together. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me be one of the judges this Saturday. It's a privilege, and it was a really good event, and thank you for the success. I'll be attending a CSEDD, Central Sierra Economic Development District meeting this Thursday. We'll be working on SEDS, update on SURF funds. We're moving positively forward in multiple angles here. I'm hoping to see the realization of success sooner than later. Not sure if I brought it up before, but it was pretty much a little bit over 3 weeks ago that we received the confirmation of the success for application on the SURF funds when it comes to the planning grant. So we're moving forward with that. We're one of the, it's been the privilege of working with Sierra Business Council and actually Inyo and Mono counties, along with the members of the Central Sierra Economic Development District, that's made that a success. So with that, I'm done.
Tomorrow night is a COG meeting, so Supervisor Toffenelli and I will be at that. And on one of the items on the agenda will be the call for projects for the jurisdiction. So hopefully next week we'll have more to report out after that meeting. And with that, that's all. What do you have?
I just want to say thank you to Maria for coming to the parade, and it's good to see you, and thank you for the pictures that you sent. It was a good time, and it was a good parade, and I think everybody that was there and involved in it enjoyed themselves, and it was a good thing. So thank you.
With that, we will end the meeting just in time for lunch. So everyone have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you next week. Bye.